Well, in case you didn't hear the latest outrageous news, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee met with the spy, Jonathan Pollard. Jonathan Pollard told NBC News that he had arranged the visit simply by phoning up the ambassador's office. He had nothing to hide, and I had nothing to hide, Pollard said, adding that it was an intensely personal visit to thank him for his work while he was incarcerated. But there were questions across the political spectrum for Huckabee over his decision to meet the notorious spy, whose long imprisonment drove a wedge between the U.S. and Israel. Representative Joaquin Castro, Democrat, Texas, who sits on the House Intelligence Committee, said in a post on X that Huckabee should not have met with a convicted traitor, while former Fox News host Tucker Carlson said Huckabee's conduct was shocking behavior from a United States ambassador. So here's more of what happened. Huckabee hosted ex-spy Jonathan Pollard for meeting at U.S. Embassy. New York Times reported this. CIA's Israel station chief said alarmed at meeting. White House not informed ahead of time. Pollard served 30 years in prison for handing over classified U.S. documents to Israel. Ambassador Mike Huckabee hosted a meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem with spy Jonathan Pollard. He is the former spy who gave reams of classified American documents to Israel. The meeting with the U.S. Ambassador Huckabee, which reportedly took place in July and was confirmed to the Times by Pollard and 3 U.S. officials, is notable because Pollard served 30 years in a U.S. prison following a high-profile conviction, which he pled guilty to. According to the Times, it is unclear whether Huckabee got approval from the State Department ahead of the meeting. It said the meeting alarmed the CIA station chief in Israel, and the White House was not informed of it. The meeting was reportedly kept off of Huckabee's official schedule. The CIA declined to comment on the meeting, and the White House officials told the outlet that the White House was not aware of it in advance. Pollard, 70, was an analyst for the U.S. Navy when he was arrested for sending U.S. secrets to Israel during the Cold War, causing a strain in relations between Jerusalem and Washington. He moved to Israel 5 years ago after he was released from prison, and the restrictive conditions of his parole were lifted during the first administration of President Donald Trump. He told the Times that this was his first meeting in a U.S. government office since then. It was a friendly meeting, Pollard told the New York Times. He said a lot of things that came up in conversation, while calling Trump a madman who has literally sold us down the drain for Saudi gold. So basically, he hates Trump, he's against our president, and our ambassador to Israel is meeting in a secret meeting without telling the White House. This is not good. This was in apparent reference to the president's recent decision to sell F-35 fighter jets to Riyadh. The decision was officially opposed by the Israeli Defense Forces, which warned that Israel's regional air superiority would be put at risk. The U.S. Embassy said in a statement to the Times that Huckabee holds meetings with numerous people, and as a matter of general policy, we do not comment as to the content of conversations, while charging the report was filled with inaccuracies. Well, I can tell you one thing. People were executed for being spies before, not just given a 30-year sentence. But here he is back when he did this. And this is what he looks like now. Daniel Kurtzer, who served as U.S. ambassador to Israel in 2001 to 2005, told the Times that the meeting just defies any kind of logic. While noting that Pollard served a harsh punishment for his actions, he added there was no reason to rehabilitate him. Pollard was arrested in 1985, convicted of espionage, and sentenced to life in prison 2 years later, despite pleading guilty in a deal his attorneys had expected would result in a more lenient sentence. He was eventually released in 2015, but was kept in the United States by parole rules and not allowed to travel to Israel. And by the way, when he was released and he went back to Israel, he kissed the ground and Netanyahu greeted him as though he was a hero. For several years, he remained subject to a curfew, had to wear a wrist monitor, and was prohibited from working for any company that lacked U.S. government monitoring software on its computer systems. In addition, he was restricted from traveling abroad. Pollard arrived in Israel in 2020 with his wife, Esther, who passed away in 2022. He had long expressed a desire to move to Israel, which granted him citizenship in 1995 while he was still in prison. The couple was met on the tarmac by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who gave Pollard his new Israeli paperwork and greeted him with the traditional Jewish blessing for when something new happens. And this was also posted by Paul Goldman and Matt Bradley, November 21st, 2025. It says, convicted Israeli spy Jonathan J. Pollard downplayed the controversy around his private meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, telling NBC News the visit was personal and wasn't done surreptitiously. The main point of the meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem in July, Pollard said, was to thank the embassy for his efforts on my behalf during my incarceration. So Huckabee was working to free somebody who had betrayed, as a traitor, the United States of America and our military secrets handed over to Israel. And Huckabee's helping him during his incarceration to be released. Pollard, a former American intelligence analyst, spent 30 years in prison on espionage charges after being found to have passed critical security documents to Israeli intelligence in the 1980s. Israel made Pollard a citizen during his lengthy prison term, and he moved there in 2020, 5 years after his release on probation. During Pollard's detention, Huckabee was among several pro-Israeli politicians who advocated for his release, arguing that the sentence was too severe for someone who had been spying for an ally. Are you kidding me? Remember Trump's show, The Apprentice, when he said, "You're fired"? Pollard described his meeting as more of a social call, and insisted that the two didn't discuss politics or Gaza. But the meeting comes amid a growing list of episodes in which the ambassador, Huckabee, a fierce champion of Israel, has appeared to deviate from official White House policy as the Trump administration deepens its involvement in Middle East diplomacy and peacekeeping. The New York Times first revealed the meeting on Thursday, which was yesterday. So it was kept hush-hush from July until yesterday. Yeah, why would you give away anything you were saying to a convicted spy? The embassy offered no further information and declined to offer a comment from the ambassador himself. Surprise, surprise. The White House was not aware of that meeting. But the president stands by our ambassador, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Thursday. Pollard said the meeting was a simple story that got far more complicated than it deserved. Well, first of all, former spies were executed. They weren't just given a free pass and then meet in secret with the American-Israeli ambassador. So this is just really outrageous because Pollard has spoken against Donald Trump, our president, which could have very dangerous implications. Now, Jonathan Pollard was a former U.S. Navy intelligence analyst, like I said, who was convicted of spying for Israel by providing a vast quantity of highly classified information in the mid-1980s. He pleaded guilty to espionage charges and was sentenced to life in prison, serving 30 years before his release on parole in 2015. The details of his espionage. As a civilian intelligence analyst for the Navy, Pollard had access to top secret information. Between 1984 and 1985, he passed hundreds of classified documents and intelligence cables to his Israeli handlers, including the 10-volume radio signal notation manual detailing United States global electronic surveillance and satellite photographs of PLO headquarters in Tunisia. The U.S. government, particularly then Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger, determined that Pollard's actions caused grave harm to national security, compromising United States intelligence sources and methods and potentially endangering American forces worldwide. The sheer volume of material passed to Israel was reportedly enough to fill a space 6 feet by 6 feet by 10 feet. Pollard claimed to be motivated by ideological reasons, believing the U.S. was withholding critical intelligence from its ally Israel. However, he also received substantial payment, including a salary, cash disbursements, and jewelry. He was given a $7,000 ring. He had previously attempted to sell classified information to other countries, including Pakistan and South Africa. Pollard was arrested in November of 1985 after he and his wife unsuccessfully sought political asylum at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. Pollard received a life sentence in 1987, the only American to receive such a sentence for spying for a U.S. ally. His wife was sentenced to 5 years in prison as a co-conspirator. He was released on parole in November of 2015. In December of 2020, after the United States Justice Department allowed his parole restrictions to expire, he moved to Israel. He was Israel first. He was granted Israeli citizenship while in prison in 1995 and received a hero's welcome upon his arrival in Israel by then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Since moving to Israel, Pollard has been a vocal supporter of the Israeli far right and has recently signaled political ambitions, advocating for the annexation of Gaza. His recent meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem in 2025, in July, reportedly alarmed United States intelligence officials. And especially alarming are his statements against President Trump. And if these documents were nuclear in nature, that's even more frightening. You have to go back and add to this about the JFK assassination, and that JFK was in arguments with the President David Ben-Gurion about that JFK did not want Israel to have a nuclear program. And interestingly, I just watched a video where a gentleman did some research and found out that, of all people, somebody who became president of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated, he happened to reroute to Dallas the very day that JFK was killed. And he was supposed to come over from Israel in the IDF and traverse all of these military installations all over the United States and give information to the soldiers or whoever he was speaking to, give them training or whatever. And he circumvented his trip and did not go to those military installations and instead flew to Dallas and was there during the time frame. I think it was November 20th through the 22nd he left Dallas. JFK was assassinated on November 22nd, which is tomorrow, 1963. Putting that together with this is really interesting. And there's a lot more that goes with this. You know, things that were mentioned by Netanyahu immediately when the first person to announce Charlie Kirk was dead. Netanyahu came on and said, we didn't kill him. So who does that? What leader from a foreign nation comes on and immediately says, we didn't do it? So this is really putting our president in danger. This is a treasonous act, especially to hide it from the White House all this time and hide it from intelligence. So I just wanted to report on this story because it's extremely important. I don't think that they just had a happy lunch. We are living in the most incredible, deceptive times I have ever seen in my entire life. So Jesus must be coming soon, and he knows who the faithful are. And believe me, we were told that if it was possible, that even the elect would be deceived, and they are being deceived. And I think they had said in another article that Huckabee believed so much in this Zionistic belief that they thought that he was compromised. People need to be brought to justice for the crimes that they've committed and not get a free pass. So a lot of people were outraged finding out about this secret meeting. And why would the meeting have to be put in secret so the White House didn't even know, circumvented Donald Trump knowing, unless there was something more to it? That's what I have to say about it, and that's what I think. I wonder what you all think about this, given the things that have been happening, the recent assassination of somebody that was a high-ranking person. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Good night.